Good morning, everybody, and welcome to this mid-morning session on day 3 of our conference. I hope everybody's been having a good time. I hope you've all enjoyed the sessions that you've been in. I'm looking forward to this session. This is hopefully going to provide some very good discussion and debate. So just before we start, a few T's and C's. This is a safe space. Within this session, there may be triggers for people, but I would encourage everybody to keep it respectful. Any nonsense, and I will eject you from the session. We have a zero tolerance for abuse and attack. Now, that's the unpleasant bit over. Let's start. So today's session is from the Peer Support Scotland team at Terence Higgins Trust. Co-production is at the heart of Peer Support Scotland and THT's flagship project, supporting people living with HIV and hepatitis C. So let's just go around the table. With us this morning, we've got a gaggle of living well specialists. So you're all in the right place if you want to talk. So we've got Martin Hutcheson, Billy Thompson, Julie Ringsell, and Niamh Millar. There will be a Q&A with a question at the end of each speaker session. And at the end of the whole session, we'll do some polls to try and get your feedback on how you've enjoyed the session. And if anybody wants to chat or make a comment, please do so in the chat function. If you want to ask a question, please do so in the Q&A function. And what we'll do is we'll bring those up at the end of each speaker session, along with the question that each speaker has to ask. Okay, without any further ado, I'll hand over to Martin. Martin, the floor is yours.
Good morning, everyone, and thank you for joining us here today with the team at Peer Support Scotland. We're delighted, absolutely delighted to bring you some of our findings and the importance of user-led projects, and also the benefits and importance of co-production. As Jimmy says, my name is Martin Hutcheson, and the rest of the team here you will meet as we go along, because we're all sharing this this presentation and workshop. So next slide, please. As Jimmy mentioned about Peer Support Scotland, Peer Support Scotland started in July, 1st of July 2017, where we were kind of flagship leading within HIV, hepatitis C, on working with peers and developing peers and more projects where it's more user-led friendly. The synopsis, obviously, of Peer Support Scotland is a more holistic approach, and a few of the services that we provide are one-to-one support, whether that be emotional or financial. And when I say financial, we help with welfare rights, with benefits, housing issues, etc., etc. We always maintain that the basic needs are met first and foremost with our service users. We also offer peer group meetings. So we run a series of meetings running from daytime ones and evening ones, and we get together all different communities together, also individually, again listening to what the peers and service users would like for us to move on. Life skills development is one of the main heart of our project, and that runs, we usually do it on a Thursday afternoon, and we have an array, a massive menu of different life skills that we offer, which is very much welcomed, but also it is produced mainly by what the peers themselves want to know about or upskill about, or they would like some visitors to come in and talk to them on specialist subjects. Again, the training and the workshop activities go hand in hand with the skills development. Next slide. So firstly, I'd like to just talk and give a wee briefing, obviously, from the past 18 months. Sadly, we have all suffered in the past 18 months with the horrible COVID-19. And I just want to sort of highlight and go over how it affected us as a team and as a charity in the third sector. So when obviously the pandemic hit us all, it really made us sit back and think, well, as you know, support workers, as an organisation, how are we going to control the well-being of our service users and peers? Now, I have to say, you know, it was difficult because there was such a thing as furlough came into play which is very difficult for all organisations, whether it be third sector or statutory or any other business all over the world. I mean, it wasn't just here in Scotland or the UK. With ourselves, our services, Peer Support Scotland, we were hit by, obviously, furlough. So our staff was reduced dramatically to one point that it was just myself that was kind of left at the helm, which obviously had its challenges. But myself and my manager and the rest of the team, health promotion team, had to get together and sort of say, what is it we can do for our service users, our peers? How do we reach out to them? How do we make sure their basic needs are being met? How do we make sure that they are living well and they're dealing with this horrible pandemic that's going on? So from time at home with our peers and service users, quite a few of them were unemployed, but equally there was a lot of our service users who were employed. And when the furlough hit them, I think, as we all did, most of us did, it was a jolly holiday for the first couple of weeks, etc. But as time goes on, the realisation sort of hit in. With the realisation, obviously, comes the mental health aspect. The financial aspect also kicks in because there's a reduction in wages. People have bills to pay. People have, maybe HP purchases that have to be met. So they were issues that were cropping up for us as an organisation and as supporters to make sure that their well-being is being met. And a lot of these people didn't know where to turn in the first place. And thankfully, as an organisation, we reached out to them to let them know we were there to support them. Albeit a lot of it was digitally and phone call, but at least we could advise them.
Sorry to interrupt, Martin. Your slides have disappeared.
All right, okay. Julie?
Sorry, I'm seeing them on my screen. Are you not seeing them? I'll go back out of this.
Okay, I'll just continue anyway and just kind of talking over, this wee part about the pandemic, how it hit and how the impact of our service users. So again, just to sort of highlight the issues that came across was a lot of anxiety. There was a lot of isolation, and a lot of isolation came because people were getting into isolation. There was a lot of loneliness. There was mental anguish. There was the welfare issues arising. There was job losses also came into play because a lot of people didn't return to work. Major issues for people living with a BBV. So there was debt issues, there was housing issues because there was rent arrears. So there was a whole array of major issues that were hitting us. And as an organisation, as I say, we had to sort of clang together. What are we going to do? How do we alleviate this? So from there, we had to sort of look, what is it? What is the needs, and the priorities of our peers and our service users? So we had to really look at our service. And what it was actually, we had to think out the box. We had to really kind of pause, our direction, our remits and our work and devise another system to make sure the safetyness and well-being of our service users and peers. And so we did that. Thankfully, as time went on, I had the opportunity to bring one of our staff members back, which was a great help to me and the organisation. And I have to say the peers and service users, because it was another body who could help them with another sort of fresh voice and a fresh perspective, because I think at that point they were sick of listening to me, quite honest with you. So with that, we brought Billy back. Billy has been instrumental in, supporting me and the organisation and the peers throughout the time within COVID. So what I would like to ask is Billy just to give us a wee kind of talk on how we decided to approach our peers, how we refer to peers, what we did, what we set up. So can I ask Billy maybe just to give us a wee insight and let the audience know what we did, sir?
Yes, absolutely. Good morning, everybody. I'm Billy, as Martin says, from GC and part of the Peer Support Scotland team. Yeah, as we're saying, for the benefits of a user-led approach, when we realised that COVID-19, was going to be not as short as everybody thought, because we were given things at the beginning saying like, oh, it'll be over by Easter, or this will happen, that will happen. But obviously it didn't. So it went on and on. So then we had to look at, as Martin said within his talk there, what we could deliver to them, to our service users and to our peers. So the first protocol was to find out what was needed, but what was needed most. So we had to prioritise what was coming in, what we could deliver, and what was feasible. Already in between this one, they were delivering food parcels, doing medication drops, checking in with folks. So I came on board, as Martin said, I was fortunate enough just to get 7 weeks furlough, but then came back. So we set up check-ins, and this was for the more vulnerable ones who needed basically contact with someone to speak. Some of them were newly diagnosed as well, so therefore they're in a quandary because they don't have the face-to-face thing open to them that anybody else newly diagnosed would get and go through the system. So again, we had to be like quite stern with what we're going to deliver and how we would approach it. So check-ins were set up, as Martin said, all along with these, like we felt they required them. Some felt they needed them weekly, other ones felt that maybe fortnightly would do, or maybe once a month. Again, it was just someone to speak to, someone to talk to. And whether it be, health related, or whether it be like they're having problems being isolated, or even other emotional support, it was just a voice. And basically, having done the calls and still continue to this day with calls, it's like, if you need 10 minutes, I'll give you 10 minutes. But if you need an hour, I'll give you an hour. That's the way it works. So there was no time scale setting it, because each individual works differently and folk open up and share in different ways. So, and again, from that, we had to then look at how can we bring them together. So it was a case of moving what we did face-to-face onto online, which included doing the groups, as we say, like men's groups, women's groups, and the support groups, along with the skills development. So all these things were going on and on and on. But in the bargain there, we also had people being referred in, either new diagnoses, along with notes come from counsellors, doctors, consultants, saying that certain individuals could do with extra and much needed support. So this is when we looked at bringing all the stuff online within the period from the COVID-19 lockdowns. And I must admit, it's been an eye-opener in the sense that we've managed to bring folk in who would never come in person because we're more remote. So with them coming online, they've engaged more, they've made friendships online, which has been brilliant. And this is what the peer support's about, and this is what we say about the user involvement things, about bringing folk through and making sure that we're friends. But we feel within this, we've succeeded in our part, but there's still room for scope and for to move forward. So therefore, with the groups, with the skills, the support, the men's and women's group, all been a great success, but into the bargain is like, we know we've still got more to do. Thank you, Martin.
Thanks, Billy. And I think that's a great insight and a great explanation of how we continued. But one of the fantastic elements that came out of that was some co-production, some great co-production work that we did with other organisations and charities. Now, these happened quite organically. They weren't difficult at all to engage with these other organisations. It was just a matter of taking time, reaching out, because we similarly were going through, each organisation were similarly going through the same issues, the same problems with their own service users and peers. So it was through a matter of time that we got in contact with other agencies such as, Waverley Care. We had already established relationships with NHS, Glasgow Clyde, we had Forth Valley, we had Lanarkshire, all the NHS boards. So we strengthened those connections to make an easier referral pathway in, so that we were supporting NHS, but we were supporting the clients and the service users who needed that extra support. And obviously, they weren't getting the full support that they needed from a lot of the statutory services because issue was COVID-19. A lot of people were going off sick, a lot of people were furloughed or just burnt out, etc. That was understandable, but at least we could help by building an easier referral pathway. And it was just a matter of contacting agencies, whether it be welfare rights organisations, debt agencies, other charity agencies, NHS, statutory bodies, etc., reaching out. And you know what? It was welcomed by the other agencies. There was no resistance whatsoever. And from that, the beauty of it all is there is a strong link between each organisation. There is a healthy referral pathway in. And you know, that will continue. I hope it will continue, because it does make life a lot better for our service users and peers, and that is the beauty of it. Can I have the next slide, if that's possible, Julie?
Martin, do you want me to continue this bit?
If you just give me the next slide, it would be good. Thanks. So one of the other, a couple of the other contributions that we actually provided, as Billy mentioned, we did prescription runs from the hospital, which helped people who were in isolation to make sure that they were getting all their medication appropriately and safely to their homes. We obviously had a food bank, again, was greatly welcomed due to struggling, and also people who were isolating or people who lived alone that couldn't get out. There was the one-to-one emotional support, again, that Billy says, so that was done either on a telephone. We could organise Zoom. Zoom has been amazing for us, especially was sent too many. And it's, I mean, at first, you know, it's a struggle going on a platform, but it's been absolutely amazing, as I'm sure you all agree with that. A lot of welfare issues that we delivered and spoke about and helped them gain more benefits. We also had a hardship fund ourselves. THT have a hardship fund we referred in, helped a lot of people through struggling with money issues. And there's a few other things that come in, but I think Julie is going to talk on Connecting Scotland, which was another big major value to the services, not only for us, but other services referred into requesting Connecting Scotland devices. But as I say, we'll go further on with Julie on that. So I will at this point pass over to Julie to tell you a wee bit more about the organisations that we did some co-production work with. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that. I don't know what's happening with the presentation. It just keeps sticking. So yeah, we did, you know, our peers were fundamental. I mean, the peers are the core of what we're actually doing here at THT and Peer Support Scotland. As Martin's indicated, a lot of what we were doing, it was really reactive at the time. Like everybody else, we were in the same situation, but we had to be really reactive. And lots of what we were doing, knew everything had to move online. And that was a big concern. How do we know that the people that we're trying to reach are actually reachable through digital devices? And the actual project from the Scottish Government, the Connecting Scotland project, was vital to what we were actually doing. We were able to, as Martin said, speak to other organisations, bring in peers and service users from their organisation, as well as our own. I think we delivered something in the region of 142 devices out to people, many rural, certainly digitally excluded, and, you know, not able to keep in contact with either friends and family or indeed their own peers. So it was absolutely vital that we did this, and it's made the massive difference as to what we've actually gone on and delivered over the pandemic, and certainly something that we will be taking on into the future with a blended approach, because people are still worried about going out and about, or, you know, may not be able to get in from rural areas, or maybe not want to come in and socialise. So it's been definitely the thing. And some of our other organisations, including Waverley Care, we did a project with them to bring along digital champions to give people those skills and abilities to use the digital devices. We've worked quite hand in hand with lots of the organisations. As I say, Waverley Care, we've done a peer audit with them, and we are working with lots of other HIV and Hep C organisations across Scotland to look at a better way for us all to work together going into the future, because co-production is vital for all of us. We've all got our little bits that we're really good at, and actually being able to share that, and so that the end users, the service users, actually are getting a better service. And going back to our peers, those digital devices then made the difference for our peers to actually be able to be part of what we're doing. They've always been part of what we're doing, but actually they've now gone on and done, come along and done their own presentations. We've helped them facilitate sessions. We've, you know, they're the ones that co-design what we actually do. They're the ones that come and say, I've got this idea, would you help me? Could I present that to the group? And, you know, then they're learning new skills. Those new skills are taking them on to different pathways. And I'm delighted to say there's several of them all going on to make, you know, have new job roles or volunteer roles with other organisations as well as their own. They're developing their skills, they're developing their abilities, and we're empowering them to do that. And without going back to the Connect in Scotland and the co-production with that actual project, they wouldn't be where they're going, which is amazing. You know, we encourage self-development. We encourage people to look at things and go out with their own comfort zone and do things that they may not normally do. And as I say, we've got some proof in the pudding in some of our service users and our staff members that have actually developed and gone on to that. So I think we'll go, we don't have the next slide. I'm going to try and share the slides. But I think the next part is maybe Martin and your scenario.
Okay. So,
Julie, don't worry about the slides. I'm in the process of uploading them now.
Okay, thank you, Jimmy.
Julie, can I maybe just sort of ask you maybe just to give us a small sort of list of people that you know that we work with and build new relationships with? You know, I'm aware.
Absolutely. So we've worked with the NHS boards, so the referrals. We've had referral pathways in from them from across Scotland. I'm based in Tayside. Tayside have been amazing, NHS Tayside, and I know Greater Glasgow and Lanarkshire and Ayrshire and Perth and Kinross. We've had really, really good referrals in from them. We've also worked with Waverley Care. Who else have we worked with?
I think we've done Hillcrest Futures, the DVA.
Hillcrest Futures, yeah, we're working with them at the moment, and we've got lots of. That's a new sort of collaboration that we're working with, and that's all again come about because we've gone out and tried to understand where else we can support people in the community, and offer our services to these other organisations and actually work in co-production. I know with Hillcrest Futures, Jimmy is also involved in that in Tayside, and we're going to be delivering some health promotion to them, along with doing some talks on HIV and Hep C and supporting one-to-one supports. So there's lots of different collaborations going on. The Connect in Scotland, as I say, has been quite pivotal to what we've actually done over the last, at least, the last year and a bit. Has been amazing.
Yeah, I think that is definite. We've worked with many organisations through the pandemic, and as I say earlier on, it's been paramount and it's been very successful, and we hope to continue with that work collaboratively. That's a tongue tire for me, that word collaboratively. Anyway, so can I ask just briefly if anyone is really interested? I'm going to give a small scenario here. This is a scenario, so I just want you to think about what I'm going to say in this. I'll read it out to you. So this was a request that came from a specialist nurse for a delivery of medication to an isolating client, and it was for the medication to be picked up at the pharmacy and delivered. So the medication was picked up and it was taken on the way to the client. We called the client as per arranged by the nurse that we were en route and we would be delivering the medication within 20 minutes. The client responded by saying, yeah, that's great. When the worker arrived at the address, knocked several times at the door, there was no answer. Worker returns to the car to call again, no answer again. Several calls later and several texts later are sent, but still no answer from the client. Worker starts to think to himself, So he contacts a colleague just to confirm that, the client's details were correct. He just contacts a colleague and asks the colleague to start contacting with the number to the service user who was waiting for their prescribed medication. Whilst the worker themselves who was delivering contacted the nurse just to confirm that the details were correct and were at the right address, situation at the right address, and asked for guidance. Meantime, the colleague informs the worker there is still no answer to any of the calls or texts. The nurse checks the client's details and they were all correct, but states that the medication the worker was in receipt of is ARVs and also a bottle of controlled medication. Nurse also informs the worker that the pharmacy would not take the medication back if they couldn't get an answer at the door, and that the pharmacy couldn't take the medication back because it was a controlled drug and it was in now the worker's ownership. So can I ask maybe written thoughts, if you can just type down what you would do in a situation like that? What were the risks? So we'll just spend a wee sort of minute, and if anyone can feed back on that.
So just as Martin says there, feel free to put your comments into the chat or into the Q&A to ask a question, and I'll be able to show your comment or question and invite you onto the stage. Whilst we're giving the audience a minute or two to think about that, Martin, you've all emphasised very strongly the benefits of both co-production and collaborative working across the whole of the BBV sector. How co-production and co-design, they've been a theme throughout the conference, and many people have been commenting on this, and Dr. Sally Brown mentioned it as somewhat lacking in academia in her opening comments. How do you think your approach has changed as a result of the pandemic?
I think, my approach and the rest of the team's thoughts on this, you have to step out the box. You have to, I think generally as a nation anyway, we do go above and beyond anyway, but I think, we have to step out the box, step aside, as I mentioned earlier on, about what we're remit, what we're set up to do, what we're funded to do, because there is a reach. Now that reach is out there. And there are many challenges to engaging with certain communities, for many reasons. But when you think about it, and when you look at other organizations who are going through exactly the same ordeal as what we do, coming together with organizations, you can have that round table, you can have that discussion, and you have the manpower and more opportunities to get into that reach, to get the communities that so much need us. So
yeah, that makes
changing your frame of mind and not be set by stone in what it says, on pieces of paper, saying that this is what you can do, you can't do anything else. Yeah, we can.
That makes a lot of sense. And in the community plenary yesterday afternoon, community engagement was discussed at length. How can we use, do you think, using your examples here, how can we use co-design and co-production to actually strengthen community engagement?
I think it's just about, it's not about reinventing the wheel, it's just about reinventing us and services and making them more notable. We've got so many opportunities, i.e. digital. A lot of this digital stuff is new to us. More people have access to digital, more people are interested in digital. So it's about advertising more services, constantly doing it, not just because you've done it once or twice. I think it's a continual pattern that we have to do. We have to keep reminding, our service users, our partners, what we do, keep that door open, keep the referral pathway constantly open, and just communication is the key of everything. But also we need to take into consideration and listen to what our service users or peers are wanting and needing.
It's a really good point there, and it's well known, although possibly not as well said as it might be, that when we engage in referral pathways and signpost clients, the best way to do that is to have a named contact for the client to actually talk to.
Yeah, I'm very much a believer in having, whoever I speak to is having a name, because then that's that person I'm going to remember, and that's that person should I need their help. I'm not going to be sent running around the building trying to find, because I'll have that contact number and I'll have that name there. So it makes that connection easier. It makes it an easier presentation for our service user or peer forward, and it gives the confidence, but it also builds that a relationship with ourselves and the peers. One, we're going to gain their trust. One, we're going to deliver. Equally, we still need to be transparent, and we should never make false promises either. But it's important, going back to what you're saying, it's important to have that named person, definitely.
Absolutely. So we have a comment from Sharon here. I'd be worried about why the service user has suddenly stopped contact, gone quiet, but unsure about what the next step might be. My gut's telling me maybe they require a well-being check, but also thinking about their confidentiality.
Yeah, that's correct. Those issues where where in the head of I'll be honest with, that worker was me, and it was a situation that I was thrown into during the pandemic, during the isolation, and the person was isolated. There was communication from prior to, and he agreed of the delivery within the 20 minutes, etc., but it went quiet. So the concerns was, what's happened within that space of 20 minutes? Has something happened to this person? Has their health declined? Is something major happened? So that was one. The other major problem risk was the fact is myself was holding controlled drugs, which could not be returned to pharmacy and could not be returned to the nurse who asked me to do the delivery. So I was sitting with that also. But my main concern was for the client, because of thinking, well, what do I do here? So we had to put a plan into action. So again, it's that safeguarding issue. Yes, confidentiality, a major thing. How do we approach this? The only way I could have approached that, should it have turned to the really needy, would have had to contact the police. One, to inform them that my concerns about, my service user, but equally I'd have to consider the fact that I was holding controlled drugs with their name on it. You know what I mean? So legally, I was being illegal holding controlled drugs with someone else's name on it.
And I was just about to bring that up, Martin. So as you were describing that, the one thing that went through my head was that this has demonstrated that a change in service provision has highlighted additional risk potentially to service providers.
Very much so. And as much as you're doing a good deed, I think what I was trying to sort of convey with this message is, these were some challenges that came along when you're doing, these deliveries or whatever deliveries. So you're facing the fact, what I was put in a situation, and what it was there wasn't as much as there was great communication with myself, liaising with the nurse and with the pharmacy. There still wasn't full communication, and that's what I'm saying about transparency. If that nurse had said to me at the beginning, "Oh, there's a controlled drugs item there," I could have said, "Hold on, I'm happy to take the ARVs, but I can't take that controlled drugs. I can't take that chance with that, legally." But it's also safeguarding that, that client, because it could turn anyway. Let's be real about it. So that was the scenario of that. Going back to the scenario was, I didn't need to get the police. I put you all at your misery because I'm rattling on about this. I didn't need to get the police. It turns out that the person had fallen asleep and didn't hear the phone within that 20 minutes, etc. So it turned out well. But what I'm saying is, when you're having co-production with other organizations or agencies, there has to be, risk assessment, whatever it is. These questions have to be asked so that you're not putting any threat to the worker or to the service user.
And I think that highlights really well, Martin, the need to constantly revisit the referral pathways and make sure that they are as good as they could, because it's all a learning point. It's all lessons learned here.
Yeah.
And we're figuring this out as we go along.
Yeah. And equally, what came out of that, Jimmy, was, we had that discussion with the NHS board, at their clinic, saying, we're happy to deliver any sort of medication except controlled drugs. So that made a clear boundary of what was expected of us, as an organisation and a partner trying to help.
Absolutely. Sharon, thank you for your question. If we have nothing else from the audience, we'll move on.
I think so. So we have another wee scenario. So we'll let Julie. Julie, are you there? Would you like to?
Yeah, I'm here. So mine's was a little bit less stressful than Martin's. So we had, again, a referral from a specialist nurse about a young man who'd just been recently discharged from the hospital. He was suffering mental health issues. He had alcoholism, some family difficulties. There was a lot of things going on in his life, and he'd really no support network around him. He'd gone home, and there'd been a situation at in his house and things. There was a whole load of things going on. He'd no money, he'd no food, he'd no electricity, and as I say, the referral came in. So we stepped in, trying to help him, see what we could do. Immediately got him some emergency supplies of food and fuel. We were on the phone to him daily to make sure he was in a bed, he was in an okay place. We were managing with that. We referred him on to other, signposted him on to other food banks and support that way. We've done a lot. We bought, we made sure he had his electricity. We made sure he had a bit of a top up on his phone so that he was able to help that. He was also delivered a Connecting Scotland device to give him. The Connecting Scotland devices come with their own Wi-Fi or MiFi, and so he was able to have connection out with his sort of remit without having to spend too much money on his phone. We continue to liaise and work with the specialist nurse. We worked with other agencies to get him in a better place. There was lots we did, and he was really appreciated of that. He's, I'm happy to see he's in a much better place now. But is there anything, again, was there anything I missed doing that? Was there things that I could have done that maybe would have made it a little bit better, a little bit easier for him? We did signpost him to, our own services and services out with it of THT, and he tapped in a little bit, but there's only so much you can do. You can try and take them and support them as best you can. But was there anything else that we could have done? That would be my question.
I think what it was fair to say in that scenario, Julie, is, his basic needs were met when, introduced to our services. We made sure he had, warmth. We had food, that his healthcare was in place. Made sure he had, a roof over his head first and foremost, but also to make sure his frame of mind was safe and secure, and that he was fully understanding of what was happening and what was needing to happen. Again, it was the importance of listening. And sometimes it's a wee bit of detective work. We're aware it's a wee bit of detective work, but also we should never in situations be afraid to ask questions or surmise, but we need to ask those questions. Never be frightened to approach someone and ask something. Sometimes it needs to be a personal question that is just not a basic demographic, because it's the only way we make sure that that person's safe. So do we have...
I'm going to show this question from Alan here. Alan's absolutely right. This has been a much discussed topic throughout the whole conference, and it really is important to make sure that we communicate effectively across the whole sector. Where were the risks, Julie, in this example, and how do you think things could have been improved with better communication?
So it's really difficult because, you know, the referral came in and it was, you know, again, a very reactive thing that we had to do something. I mean, we immediately that day went and got him some food and fuel cards and things. But it was all new to him as well. So had we maybe have known a little bit beforehand about, you know, about him, it was all really new to him. I was new to him. But actually, you know, we were able to build up a bit of rapport, and, you know, not just me, the team. You know, the team became involved in it. Martin became involved in it and chatted to him, and we looked at, Martin's really good with welfare stuff. He looked at things. Martin actually stepped in with some of the council issues that he was having. There's lots of things, you know, so whilst co-production looking at other services out of THT, within THT, we were looking at services and things for him as well. So,
and I think that's a really good point. Not only were you involving people outside of the organisation, you were searching within the organisation to make sure that the client had everything that he needs. And Sharon has just commented here that it looks like you provided all the support and guidance you could and directed to the most appropriate services, demonstrating the importance of links to the other services. And echoing Alan's comment there, strong links built within the whole of the BBV HIV sector.
Yeah, thank you. And she's saying, you know, we supported one-to-one. We did. And, you know, I'm delighted to say he's moved on and he's in a much better place. And, you know, it's not to say that we're not, you know, we still tap in and have a wee quick conversation. How are you doing? How's it going? You know, it's been really, you know, beneficial for him to know that we're here. But actually, like what we say all the time, it's really important that our peers actually take that empowerment, take that strength and move on. And he certainly is one of the ones that have moved on to a better place, which is really, really good to see.
Great stuff. Do we have any further comments or questions for this case study? No, if not, let's move on then.
So, here in Vitality is a project which, you know, has proven itself to be a major success within THT and has now moved nationally and delivered. And to tell you a wee bit more about this, I'm going to invite Billy to come in and talk a wee bit more on what Here in Vitality is about, what was set up, how it was delivered, and the importance of co-production again. Billy?
Cheers, thank you, Martin. Here Vitality, as we see on the caption here, the capacity for survival or for the continuation of a meaningful and purposeful existence. This was a workshop which was delivered in 2019 at part of THT Scotland under the Peer Support Scotland banner. And it was, again, devised by an idea that came through a discussion. And to give credit where credit is due, it was an idea that Martin had. And when he came forward and then spoke to certain service users and certain peers, they then all got together within these steering committees and groups to see what could we do, how could it go forward, what we need to look at, how would we address it? So it then became the part of like, let's break this into 3 sections. So it was all about looking at you when you were diagnosed. So that was your past. Then looking at the here and now. So looking at where you are now and looking basically to see the journey that you took, but sometimes you're unaware of journeys that you take. All of a sudden you realise that you've done something and you don't realise your resilience has been that strong. And then the final part was looking to the future about what's in place in the future for us as we grow older, not just with HIV, but also, you know, with other comorbidity things that goes on within our own well-being. So whether things were in place within the health service or the care service. So that's the third part. So when we originally did this workshop in 2019, it was a case of, it was done over a weekend. Session 1 and 2 were put through on the Saturday. And then on the Sunday, we did the final part. I'll be honest with you, in all my years at THT, because I came in originally at THT as a service user, and then moving on to doing voluntary work, sessional work, I'm proud now to say that now a contracted employee of THT, and all the steps of this has been the best workshop that I personally ever took part in. So when it came to the fact of looking at what we're going to do and how it's going to be delivered, Martin and his team and the other peers involved and the other service users then came up with the concept of Hearing Vitality, and the concept worked. More so the fact that we then went on to a platform and we were talking about what Scotland did. And it was something similar to what we're doing today. There was a conference thing on, and someone had come in from down south and they were checking what Scotland was doing on all these different platforms. And they saw the talk that we were doing at the time regarding the work that Peer Support Scotland was doing on Hearing Vitality. And they went back to THT down south and they said to them, I've just seen this workshop. Is there any way we can get this? Is there any way we can go forward with this? So to cut to the chase, this was now picked up by our user involvement team down in the London office and ran out of the Brighton office. So on the terms of basically doing co-production, the programme itself is focused on work within the service teams and the steering groups, testing different ways of working with the service users and our peers. So supporting the staff as well was always coming along with the service user. Had to feel confident enough that the staff had the strength and the purpose to do, and the skills and the knowledge. So with the aid of this co-production, we here at Peer Support Scotland had went forward, and then we've now delivered a workshop to the AAF, which is the African Advocacy Foundation, which is from Black and Caribbean and African community. So, and it was primarily put to them, and they loved the whole idea. So we then rolled out meetings, continuous meetings over months to find out how we can deliver this, how we can change if it needed to be changed. And it ended up being within the core production thing. We then had to look, you know what I mean, like we find a unified version of what we're going to be delivering in the collaboration with each other, you know what I mean, and working towards the common goals. Because again, we're delivering to a community that we hadn't delivered to before. And then we had tailor-made with getting the language right, because as we know sometimes within certain communities, English is not the first language. So we had to make it more purposeful, more meaning, and having the sense of like it would be understanding. So we had to look at that and come together and look at common goals, using the collaboration tools that were there for us to do at the time, but also to look at it and see where we could actually make sure that not only do we deliver this, but we educate, we train, we work together, and we move forward, and we evaluate it right to get to that stage. So as I say, after months and months and months of actual talks and one-to-one meetings, they decided to go ahead with Hearing Vitality, and we then rolled it out over 3 sessions over 3 weeks. Each session was meant to be 90 minutes long, but it ended up being we went organic with it, and some sessions lasted 2 hours, and the final session lasted 3 hours. So it's one of those ones. But the magic of this whole thing, the ethos of the whole thing was like people who never opened up before were opening up and telling their stories and sharing within their groups and their community, which was really, really, really strong. Because even people within that group who went weekly, it was a case of like they were hearing for the first time other parts of the stories of people's lived experience that they didn't know. And even though they became friends, they had them over for dinners, they knew their families, they went about, they did everything together, but they didn't know that basic background. So when they have to look back at how they were first diagnosed in the first part, and then sharing that story, it can become emotional, because when we did it face to face, there was strong emotions in the room, there was tears. We had people in place to look after people's, mental health and any other well-being that maybe needed at the time. So we had to look at that to put it online as well. So we had breakout rooms in case anybody had to go in. There was someone there who could reassure them, see if they want to come back into the group or whether they wanted to leave. But we were there, and then we do a check-in later on. So everything was put in place. The second part is looking at the here and now and how you've moved on. Like I said earlier, again, same setup, safe rooms there, just in case anything was brought up. But we were finding as time was on, when we got to the second week, that people who didn't want to basically interact on the first week wanted to tell their story in the second week. The reflection of it then gave them the chance to say like, oh, they've done that, I can do this. So to say, after months of talks and one-to-one training, they brought in their own facilitators who had never facilitated before, which then we did one-to-one training with them to show them, this is what we're doing, what you're comfortable with, this is how we want it presented. At the same point, this is the feedback and the look that we're looking for you to give us, if you can do that. I must admit, everybody came on board from the AEF, stepped up and did a brilliant job. So this is a natural success, not just with doing a programme, but also in the form of co-production. Going together with another organisation who had seen something online, who then decided like, oh, I want to do this, I want to deliver it for the groups. So it was rolled out, it worked well, like I said. The organisation, which has been going since 1998, it's great, it's a community within the whole of England, but it's going to be opened to the whole of the UK, because the strength of this workshop has shown them that having done it in this workshop going UK-wide from THT and the service users part is a case of like, it's the strength of the actual workshop in its own right. But more so the fact like the platform that we had to do it to, it was all the logistics of that, changing it round. How do we do this exercise? How do we do that? Some of the things did get changed from. In one part within the exercises was a letter to yourself, looking back at when you're first diagnosed to where you are now. That didn't work for the African community. So what had to happen there was like we had to look at it and see what would happen. And they came up with this great idea, because all of a sudden this took branches. It's like I say, plant acorns, you get trees. This is what happened with this workshop. And as we went on, it developed into my letter to HIV. And some of the responses back were just amazing. So rather than like looking at and giving yourself advice, as we say that old adage, like, what would you say to your 16-year-old self now? You know what I mean? This whole thing, what would you say to yourself? Or write a letter to HIV. So they wrote their letters to HIV, and some of them were just amazing. My favourite one was actually one about like, I keep you in the garden shed. Like the lawnmower, I only get it out at certain seasons when I need to deal with the grass. Like HIV, I only need to deal with you when I go to my clinic. That was it. They took on board what was going on with them and understood where it was happening with them. So it was just a case of like accepting and moving on. Then you see that journey, then you see that strength. So I'm happy to say that everything went well with that workshop, and we continue to roll out more workshops through the UK. And at this moment, I'll hand you back to Martin.
Thanks, Billy. That's great. It is a wonderful workshop, and if anyone's interested, please don't hesitate to contact us, and we can certainly have a discussion on that, as is in many of our workshops. At this point, I'd like to invite Niamh, who is actually going to do the next few slides. But maybe Niamh, if you wouldn't mind having a wee summary of Hearing Vitality yourself, because you yourself had took part that day.
Yeah, the initial, as Billy said, sorry, my name's Niamh. Good afternoon. I think we've just passed the afternoon point. So I had taken part as a service user in one of the original hair and vitality workshops in 2019, and it was, as Billy said, one of the best things I've ever done. It was a chance to confront how we feel, where we are, and how we did that. As Billy said, this exercise I'm about to share with you was part of the original thing, and as Billy said, through the co-production with the AIF, they developed that to something that would work for them. But the initial genesis of this idea was our gingerbread person, who you can see on the screen at the moment. We were looking back to who we were at the point of diagnosis, and we actually were able to, part of that was to fill in the gingerbread person as to what you looked like then. Who were you when at the point of your diagnosis? For some of us, it was quite a long time ago, so fashions had changed. So it's quite interesting to sort of look at yourself, albeit in this format, with different hairstyles and different clothing styles, and in my case, different hair colours. We were in a really safe space to do this, and we had to be really emotionally honest with each other to do this, and ourselves. Some of the things you can see on the screen here are the feelings we had at the time of diagnosis. There was fear, was the largest thing, certainly for myself. There's a lot of isolation. I didn't know anybody else really at that point that was living with HIV. I didn't know how to discuss my HIV status with other people. That led to anxiety. And one of the anxiety was because of the judgment that I feared I would have from people. And also being afraid at that point, before we knew about can't pass it on and you equals you, there was the being scared of transmission. Can I have the next slide, please? So we can discuss, we could show examples of the gingerbread people that we had at the time, but not everyone on the call today is living with BBV. So we're going to talk about another virus, and I don't think there's any prizes for guessing which one that's going to be. Picture it, the world, 2020. There was a new danger that was a threat to us all. Coronavirus hit, and we all went through a worldwide panic because we'd never experienced this before. It was something that was new. Some of the fears that we had around that time were about acquiring COVID, how it was transmitted. Did we really know how it was transmitted? We were scared for our loved ones. We were overwhelmed, certainly by the sort of continual bombardment with the news, certainly it felt like. And there's loads of feelings about this. So I'd like to ask yourselves to be a wee bit emotionally honest with yourselves too. If you've got a piece of paper and a pen handy, quickly draw out your gingerbread person and write down how you felt at that time. I drew a gingerbread person earlier when I thought we were having technical difficulties, and I'm not going to win any prizes for art. But if you feel free to share them with us, please do. Because a lot of this feelings were, as you can see on the screen. If I could have the next slide, please. There were a lot of parallels with COVID and HIV and around the language that was used around that at the time. And some of the things that we experienced through the Hair and Vitality workshop were quite similar, actually. The emotions behind how we felt around COVID. Hopefully now with COVID, a lot of people feel better about their understanding. They know how to avoid those risks. They feel better connected and they feel hopeful. And certainly that's how I felt at the end of the Hair and Vitality session with my own diagnosis. There was a better understanding all around. I'd be interested to see if any of you who are drawing this in are going to be emotionally honest enough to say, are you wearing pajamas on your bottom half? I know we still can't see you. But I hope that's give you a bit of an insight into how we carried out this workshop. I'll say it genuinely was almost life-changing, to be honest, because you're so connected to other people. You're exploring your own sense of identity. And as you can see, the period of reflection was a game changer, because you realise you're not that person at diagnosis, you're here and you're in a much better place. So I hope that's gone some way to help explain part of the exercise that we did with Hair and Vitality. And I'm not sure who I'm passing over to now.
Just as an interjection here, Niamh, Billy, both of those stories were, I think, really powerful. I have a question here from Sharon, just on what you've both been talking about. Have you seen an increase in service users accessing the service since having the blended approach, more online telephone support through COVID?
Yes, I must admit, it was one of those ones that, like I said earlier on, because and then when Martin's doing the piece about, people in furlough and the lockdowns and stuff like that, from that we've managed to actually bring folk on board who didn't interject with us or interact with us in any way, apart from the odd phone call or whether their welfare rights or they wanted to check something out. All of a sudden, being at home, being either furloughed or in isolation, they then came online. They then became part of the groups. We seem to have got bigger groups due to the fact the rural part being online joined us, and they became quite strong. And like we always say, it's like any group, we say, if you can make it, be nice to see you there. And we say that even on the online groups. But we had a core of people who would come face to face, and we found as time went on, they decreased because they were used to the face to face, and they wanted that interaction, that support face to face. So they've not really engaged on the online, but they have had telephone support. That's when the other calls, myself and Martin, came in at the beginning, so they get telephone support. And likewise, Julie does the same in her area. But it's when we look at the strengths of even the Connection Scotland stuff, it got us out to the more rural ends, and these people have come in, they've interjected, and it's gave us a new and a stronger sense of worth when we're delivering groups and even doing the support.
I'm not going to comment too much further on that, because I'm actually going to give a bit of a closing talk after we've looked at one of the other co-productions that we've done. So I'm going to save it for then.
Perfect. Thanks, Niamh. And Sharon has just commented on the answers that you've given, and it clearly resonates there. So we'll move on.
Thanks, Jimmy. CVR. Again, this is another great story of collaboration work, and from CVR's Glasgow University Centre of Virus Research. So that's a wee brief synopsis and a discussion from the team on how this is developed and still moving forward. We were approached by the Centre of Virus Research team to talk about HIV mainly, but also including hepatitis C, because that's the persons we support, and what it was is to establish sort of communications, understanding, educating both parties, whether it be the professionals from the labs, the doctors, the professors, etc., who take our bloods, educating them and giving them a sense of who that blood sample belongs to, really, because that's all they see is a blood sample. So we're trying to build a link between the professionals and the service user to reduce stigma, to build education on emotion, to build a picture overall of who this blood sample belongs to, what it is, is going on in their life, what it's like to live with a BBV, how the lifestyle is, what their background is. So it's building a relationship, it's helped reduce stigma. So this has been going on for a few months now, and what happens is it's all done, unfortunately, but fortunately, online. We get together and they come into our group meetings, our skills development meetings, and they bring Just recently, they've been bringing some of the professionals in to meet some of our service users, get to know them, get to see them, and get to hear their stories. And equally, the service users get to hear their stories, you know, and their backgrounds, where they come from, what it's like, you know, when they are given a blood sample. Do they think about that person? You know, all these kind of intricate wee thoughts. So that's, I think, hopefully a brief synopsis of that project. I'm going to ask Julie now just to talk a bit more and the next step and what's developed from our meetings with the CVR. Julie.
Thanks, Martin. So yeah, it was, you know, it started off this little, you know, this little venture, which is now gone and grown arms and legs. It's really getting really interesting for everybody. You know, the scientists wanted to know the language that they should be using, and the peers wanted to tell them that the language they should be using when referring to, you know, someone living with HIV or hepatitis C. And they've come together, and these scientists, researchers, professors, head of thing, they're so interested in hearing what our peers have got to say about it. And the peers are really engaged and so excited to be part of this project. So one of the things that they did, and I'm going to bring Billy in a minute because his idea of this was really, really good. So one of the things they did, they wanted to give us a bit of excitement and the journey of a blood sample. What happens when you're sitting in that surgery, you've given your blood sample and you've allowed it to go for research? What happens to that blood sample? But they did it in a very holistic way. They brought in an artist, and this artist was full of enthusiasm and excitement. So, you know, and really excited to hear in our heads, what do we think? What happens when that blood sample goes away? Where do we think? And all these, you know, we had bits of drawings going on and words and ideas and all these things going on. And it was really exciting to hear people's imaginations coming to alive and you know, adding all these things and the journey that they think their blood sample's going on. And you know, the scientists and the artists, again, a bit of co-production and collaboration. This artist was so enthusiastic. It's going to go on to be a much bigger thing. There will be some physical resources at the end of this for someone to, for everybody to be able to, you know, have access to. And I'll let Billy tell his little story about what he thinks his blood sample journey looks like.
Thank you, Julie. Yeah, it was one of these ones. This was a great workshop for this development to get to this bit. Was the fact that they wanted us, as Julie says, to take the title, The Journey of a Blood Sample, and how would you then devise that as like in a drawing or something like that? Well, somewhere within the back of the recesses of my head, my first thought was going like, oh, I'm going to make this into a ghost train. It's a ghost train journey. So it starts off with lining up, waiting to go in. So that's you basically, you know, on your journey, going to the clinic, getting organised, ready to see the nurse, done your bits and bobs beforehand, check your weight, whatever they've got to do, and then going into that room to get the bloods done. So that was me. So getting the bloods done was basically getting into that seat on that ghost train. So every breakdown that you've got to do where you're thinking about, so what happens there and how do we know that happens there and what does really happen to that? But these were all going through our heads, so we're visualising all that. And when someone says that you can put on a show and like no budget, as in the budget's open to you, spend as much as you like, well, I was all singing, all dancing at this point. So it had the music, it had the lights, it had the glitter, but also at the fact that we were taking it seriously enough that you made that journey entertaining as well as informative. So it was looking at where the blood went, who it went to, how much was used, what was taken. So like if you've ever been on a ghost train, and no doubt you have, you know, through your years, like myself, but we know we go through it and we're unsure of that bit, then something will jump out here. And even through these workshops, everything else, it is a case of like, we're learning parts that they do that we never gave a thought to. So that ghost train on our last session there a few weeks back there got even bigger and even longer. So I'm actually thinking maybe it may be a roller coaster rather than a ghost train, but it gave a good insight to like what they were looking for, how we would approach it, and how we analyse things in our heads when we go and do, you know, certain tasks that we've got to do. Thank you, Julie.
Thanks, Billy.
Thanks, Billy. So, as I say, it's going to end up a resource of some description. There'll be videos and you know, we're going to be able to access this. The artist is going to put that her ideas onto paper, and you know, it's really difficult. Again, it was online. You know, we're holding up bits of paper of our thoughts and our, you know, our drawings and things. You know, none of us are budding artists, but we, you know, we'll manage to do something. So the outcome will be a resource for everybody to have access to, and it's generated interest from other organisations. And we've got, you know, we're not going to say too much now. There's another organisation come to us to do a bit of co-production as well on a similar strand, which is really exciting. It means that people are listening. People are listening to third sector. They're listening to the peers that are actually involved in this project. It's a really exciting time, and the peers they're getting their voice over. They're being able to say what they think, and you know, and you know, never the twain would meet normally of these scientists and people living with a BBV. It's a blood sample. There's no connection, but it just shows the enthusiasm from the Centre of Virus Research and what they want to get out of this. They want to humanise what's happening. So it's a really exciting time for us all. So I think that's about it. Martin, I don't know if you've anything else to say about CVR.
No, I just think, you know, Watch This Space is a great piece of work, and it highlights the fact, you know, of good co-production, but it's also battling stigma. And normalising also. So I think that's a great piece of work, which I'm very proud to be part of as our peers. I'd like to, we're coming to the end, and I would really like to pass this on to Niamh, who will summarise for us today. Niamh.
Thank you. So before joining Terence Higgins Trust, which is very recent actually, I was in another full-time job that largely kept to office hours, and that meant I had previously been unable to take part in the Peer Support Scotland workshops, some of which we've heard of today. However, I was able to attend other workshops that were out with office hours that were co-productions with other organisations, namely Waverley Care. And it was great because it meant that I could meet peers, enjoy the activity-led sessions we've had. And during the course of that, you would hear from other people that they were actually giving talks at these groups and having, you know, the leading discussions and leading workshops. And I kind of always hoped that I would be able to attend those, but work kind of always got in the way. If I'm being completely honest, I didn't really think I needed these workshops for myself because, as I said, I was in a full-time job, I was managing my medication, I was adulting. Oh yes. But I was wrong, really wrong. And we all know what happened next. And from the very first lockdown, I was on furlough. My family live in a different country. The accent might give that away. And pretty much all of my friends were still at work. They were still working full time. And I'm sure that may have been the case for some of you as well. So you'll know where I'm coming from when I had those feelings of anxiety and isolation. But THT soon got in touch to say that they were moving online. My first thought, well, it'll fill the time if nothing else. But very, very quickly, that became an actual lifeline. For the first time in a long time, I was actually able to connect with other people living with HIV. And I hadn't actually realised how much I really needed that. To not be the only person in a room, albeit a Zoom room, as a person living with HIV, was fantastic. And better still, we were able to forge connections as peers. We were able to form connections as friends. We work together with each other. We work together with Terence Higgins Trust. We work together, as we've heard, with other organisations and other charities. I had been so entirely wrong previously. I really did need this. I've always been reasonably confident, but my engagement really furthered that. And it really furthered and cemented my feelings of community, which is so important. As I said, my friends were mostly working full time. And that meant I only really got to see people for actual face-to-face, in actual real life engagement once a week, and at a 2 metre distance or a 1 metre distance, or whatever the rules happened to be at that time. But after a few weeks, they were commenting on how my mental health had improved. And it was through being a participant in these groups. Because in these groups, we support each other. We encourage each other. We grow together. We see how each other has grown and how each other has flourished. From that person who was too shy to even turn their camera on, too shy to talk, and would really only use the chat box to say hello and cheerio, become someone with the most wonderful smile, who not only engages now, is actually in talks with us to facilitate leading a workshop. And from another person who's expressed a desire to work in this area and now work part-time within the HIV sector. And myself, with this new role, we've all grown. There was never a case in any of this, in any of the workshops, of the parents are secretly feeding us our vegetables through hidden means. This really was a collaborative process. To coin a phrase that I've very recently become aware of, this was user-led engagement and peer designed, because that's what it was. I can't stress to you how much of a lifeline this has been for me over the past however long we've been in living with COVID, because I live on my own. Whether it was taking part in the women's group or the skills development workshops, we knew that we could come with our ideas because we knew that we were listened to. We knew when we were heard, which is a really important distinction. We were listened to and we were heard. Our views were taken on board and they were actioned. We aren't meant to say that living with HIV is terrible, because sometimes it is. And that's the reason why all of us exist. We're all here to support the community of people living with BBVs. And it's through that support that we can see our peers and our service users grow and flourish. Because when one of our service users shares their story with us and their experiences with us, that's a real privilege. And it's now my wholehearted privilege to be working within this sector too. And I really look forward to working with some, if not all of you, because together we can. Thank you.
Thank you, Niamh. And I think that sums it all up for us, especially as an organisation, but certainly for us as Peer Support Scotland. And hopefully there's been some inspiration to all the audience out there. At this point, we obviously like to thank everyone, thank the team of Peer Support Scotland, thank Terence Higgins Trust, and thank our partner organisations and everyone we've done co-production work with, and I hope that continues. Please do not hesitate to contact us at any point, and we're always there, even just for a blather information or to share something, or if we can help in any form of the way. And at this point, as I say, thank you, and we're happy to take any questions that you may have at this precise moment. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you, Martin. Niamh, that was an amazing piece to end on, and thank you for sharing that. Your own journeys are always the most powerful. Your own experiences are always the most powerful, and it's fair to say that this demonstrates exactly how we can make a difference.
For sure, Billy, for sure.
Jimmy,
Yes,
you called me Billy.
that's the whole
I'm
thing.
sorry.
We might look alike. So
That's the whole thing, Jimmy, is it's your own personal experience. And like we said, even with the hearing vitality, those 3 steps take you back to being diagnosed, where you are here now, and how you're going to go in the future. It's all about resilience, the steps forward, and showing your own strengths. You know what I mean? And that can only be done with the support, as Niamh said so eloquently, you know, in the end piece there, is that whole factor is, if you've got the support and you've got the right tools round about you, you're on to a winner.
exactly, and resilience. You mentioned resilience there, Billy. That's a word that's being used increasingly throughout the COVID pandemic, and it risks being overused. But I think here in this session, you've demonstrated exactly what that means and why it's necessary.
I'd just like
We've got polls running. Sorry, Julie. We've got polls running, folks. So before the session ends in about 10 minutes, please feel free to jump onto the poll tab and fill out your feedback. Thank you very much. Sorry, Julie, I was interrupting you there.
So, no, sorry, I interrupted. I'd just like to, reiterate what Martin said. We're all here. We're always welcoming to new people to come on board, whether it be co-production or new service users. We've got a variety of things that we offer. The women's group, which is the United Women's Group, or Men United, which is for gay and bisexual men, and our Thursday skills development group, as well as all the other bits and pieces that we do. We've done some co-production with our teams down south, and so life after lockdown sessions, that kind of things. There'll be more of that coming. So, watch the space, get in touch. We're always here. We're always welcoming.
And we're not a bad bunch, really. We're not a chance to play.
We're not a bad bunch.
So if you have any links to share with the audience, please put them into the chat function.
If you put up the last slide, you'll have our.
I'll just grab them, Martin.
Okay, fine. Thanks, Julie.
If they're on the slides, Martin, I will put the slide pack back up.
I've just popped them in the chat.
Wonderful, Julie. Thank you.
Yeah.
Okay.
Thanks for doing that techie bit, Jimmy. I don't know what happened earlier on. It kind of just chucked me out in the end.
No worries. So there are all the contact details for the Peer Support Scotland team. Please, if you know of anyone who might need this kind of support, or even a chat, because sometimes that works well too.
Definitely, and a chat, is so important to some people that don't have a constant really in their lives, and we're always there, as I say, like a blether, and
like a blether. And sometimes that's what it takes, just a blether, not in a clinical setting, not in any kind of official setting, just an ear for someone to say, look, this is crap.
Of course.
I think that goes also for other organizations as well. So sometimes you have a gem of an idea and you're not quite sure what to do with it, or you're not quite sure how to develop that, or indeed if anyone would be interested in that. So it's always good to sort of share ideas in that sense too. So absolutely, our details are on screen, as they say on the television, and please do get in touch, because that's what this is about. It's about co-productions, helping each other to help others. So our doors are absolutely always open, virtual though they may be.
Virtual though they may be at the moment.
At the moment.
Fingers crossed for the near future, I know. So, folks, if we have no comments or questions for the team, and the polls are going well. We have strongly agree across the board for all of the questions, which is really good. That's a very good reflection on the session. Okay, folks, all it remains for me to say is thank you for attending this session. I really hope it's meant something to you. I hope you've got something out of it. I hope you enjoy the rest of the conference, and please do get in touch if any of the team can help. Good morning, everybody, and thank you for coming.
Thank you, everybody. Thank you.
Thank
Have a
you.
good evening. Thank you.